Great. Hello. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm really excited that Chuck is with me and Kristen as well. My name is Tricia Chuplis, and I am an academic relationship manager within the IT department. And my counterpartner, Chuck, he is the ERP Systems Specialist. So basically, he is my developer, or I should probably reverse that because, he's far more important than I am. So I'm going to move through the presentation rather quickly. We do have 6 videos that are short that we are going to show you, and it's basically how the forms are worked here at Holy Cross. So both Chuck and I have been here at Holy Cross for 23 years each. So our working relationship was already established, which made it very easy for us to work together. So what were we tasked with? Well, we were tasked with a system that we were retiring, and we had a few language placement exams in that old system, but they weren't fully automated. And we also needed to provide a way for the registrar to access these exam scores and then slide them over to PeopleSoft Student, our STAR system that we use. So those were our main goals. And to do that, we were hoping to leverage the GT form work to build 8 language background questionnaires and 3 exams, so that it would provide a more streamlined process, not only for the business, but also for the student experience. So what did we need in a system? Well, we need a branch-based logic because the Spanish department has at least 10 different outcomes a student could achieve based on either the exam or the background questionnaire. We needed a calculated score for all of our exams. We needed a timer because faculty wanted to know how long it took a student to go through or move through the exam. Sometimes students would say, oh, I placed really low, but it only took me 5 minutes to take the exam. So we needed a way to capture that particular instance. We needed a workflow. We needed to be able to provide faculty that needed to review background questionnaires because not all languages have exams. Some are required to add an image of an essay that they wrote in the language, a audio file or a video file that would need to be attached and uploaded. So we needed a way for the faculty to get a communication. There was something there waiting for them, as well as to let the student know that we did receive their submission and that we were working it. Then we needed to get all those scores bundled up, and we needed to get that to the registrar. And we used the translate table that Chuck will talk about to pass that information over to the registrar and into our existing PeopleSoft system. So at the very end of the day, what does it look like? This is a quick flow of what it looks like. Denise Davies, our project manager at the time, put this together. And basically what it says is, regardless of whether you take or get a placement from the background questionnaire, or from the exam, or if you're instructed to see the department chair, it all comes back down to we need to get that score, that course, to a table that will translate for the registrar to backfill all of the prerequisites a student needs. So you're probably saying, oh my gosh, whoa, how do we get this done? It's just Chuck and I, and how do we balance creating 8 forms, 3 exams with everyday tasks and projects? So I will say that the college entered into the mentorship program with Gideon Taylor, which was fabulous. And I completely recommend, if you're going to be doing something like this, that you participate in that program. What we ended up doing was, with Kristen, who is our angel, and we cried the day we had to let her go, we wanted to create those forms. We wanted to own the process and understand how everything worked, so that we could build in the future. But we knew we needed expert guidance through Kristen and through Mike. So how did that start to take shape? Working with Kristen, we met for weekly, and sometimes more than once a week, for 17 plus weeks. And then we would draw upon Mike for his technical expertise when Chuck came up against an issue, maybe with the timer or the score fields. So he would help Chuck build there. All our meetings were recorded so that we could use them in the future to reference. And we would have weekly action items, or as I call it, homework. I would always ask Kristen for homework. What can you give me for homework so that we can start this and have it ready for next week, so that we could spend more time building versus discussing and strategizing, which, thank goodness, we had the mentor program, because we drew upon all of those items quite frequently. So I'm a big, oh my gosh, I need to build, let's build, let's build. And I had to step back and say, okay, well, what are we going to do? Before we build, we really need to define and document. So our previous project manager had put this particular flow together for Spanish. And this is one page of an overall 3-page document of different pathways that a student could end up on. And once we had that all defined, Kristen put it into a great document that we would use to build. We also have what we call the book, and I often say to Chuck, hold on, let me reference the book. The book is carried around by me everywhere we go, and it has every email, every document, every flow, every policy, everything that we know about a language in one place. So now you're probably saying, that's great, thanks, but let's really take a look at what these forms are doing and how great they are. So we have a couple of scenarios for you. The first one is how a student will go in and they will be assigned a course placement based on just taking the background questionnaire. So I'll enlarge my screen here. Hopefully it may be a little bit fuzzy at first, so I apologize. We always make the student acknowledge the academic integrity policy. Then, if you notice these questions, these are all the questions that were on the workflow that I previously showed you. So here we have the radio buttons that have to be answered.
Hey Trish, the video isn't showing. We still just see the slides with the scenarios on it.
No, that's not good. Stop sharing. Let's see. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Super. So this is the first scenario where a student will come in and they will take the background questionnaire. All students have to take the questionnaire. They acknowledge the academic integrity. And then again, all of these questions that you see are from the diagram that I showed you earlier, the flow chart. So we basically built everything off of that flow chart. So we have our radio buttons, and then each field has a trigger. So however the student answers it is how they will be directed to the next branch within the pathway. And in this particular case, the trigger is the AP IB scores. So a student could be, if they did not have their scores, they would be directed to wait. If they did have their scores, we do ask them what the score is, and then based on that score is whether they're going to get an assignment immediately or be told to take the exam. So in this case, notice that the submit button does not display until the student comes to the very end of the process. We also didn't want students to know what their placement was before they got to the end, because we didn't want them to go back and change any answers. So once they do submit, they get an online message that appears, and that tells them what they placed in. How about this? Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the process, the second scenario, where the student needs to take the background questionnaire, but they're instructed to go directly to the exam. So let's see if we can get this one to play. And again, always have to sign the academic integrity based on how the student progresses through the questions is where they get the outcome. And again, we don't let the students see their placement until the very end. And here we have the instructions to go to the exam. Now notice down in the bottom, we have a timer. So as soon as the student clicks on next, the timer will start. They have 60 minutes to complete the exams. Plus, we built in an extra 30 minutes for those that needed accommodations and extra time. So that is all on Chuck and Mike for doing that incredible work there. I'll just skip down through here. Each one of these questions, there are about 60 to 66 questions on each exam, and each one has 3 fields to them. They have an instruction field, they have a drop down so the student can choose, and they have an answer field, which is calculated behind the scenes by Chuck and then sent to the translate process. Once the student finishes, the submit button is there, and again, they receive their assignment for their course that they could register for. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second, and I'm going to give you another one. All right, so in this case, this is when the student completes the background questionnaire, but then they are directed to go see the department manager or department chair or the coordinator, because they may be a native speaking student, but they may not have the writing or the reading abilities. So to best place native speaking students, we have them just go to the department chair, sit down, talk with them. And notice this is very important, is the message they get is that they need to go and contact the department chair. But look at what happens. The form is then put into a pending state, because what we wanted to do was automate this process fully so that now, once the student goes in and meets with the professor, the professor can then recall the form and assign a placement for them. So each form is similar, but they have little unique, quirky little processes that we had to adjust for. So this one, I'm just going to show you really quickly as we do this again. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to open a new video and I'm going to share. So this is what happens once the student is counseled by the department chair. The department chair will come in and using the Evaluate tab, they'll recall the form and they'll see all of the answers. And notice we have this recommended placement. It's defaulted to department chair. This is what the department chair will use to select a placement. The other thing I want you to notice here is notice that there is no button for them to submit quite yet. That's because we don't want them to be able to submit if they haven't chosen a placement. So as soon as we choose the placement, the submit button comes up. And then again, Chuck's process in the background with the translate value gives a score that the registrar will use. So here, I kept the score on so that you would be able to see this. They didn't take the exam, so there is no exam grade. The course placement is the PeopleSoft course that it's related to. And then Chuck will talk more about the score values that we created with the registrar for min maximum values to place a student in. Okay, I think I have one more. And this one is the email communications. Again, we needed ways to communicate at all levels of the process to the students. So right from the beginning, we have them take the background questionnaire, and based on the logic is the communication that they receive. And not only is it on screen because we needed to show them immediately how they placed or what they needed to do, but we also send that email. So the email portion will be coming up quickly. So you see the online, you see the course placement and the test score again. And this is what the email looks like that goes to the student. And this is actually controlled by a smart source. So we'll take a look at some of those as well. Okay. Let me go back to my presentation. So those are all of the scenarios for Spanish. So if we quickly look at the form build behind the scenes, right now we're on version 35801. Whether the decimals are in the right place or not, I'm not sure. That would be Chuck. I always say, Chuck, what are we running? What are we running? So we chose to use the add, the edit, and the view tasks. Then we created our pages, then we created segments, and we really heavily leveraged the visual ifs to make the forms do all the heavy lifting. I should say that Kristen showed us how to do that. So let me see, can you see this or you just see the presentation?
Just the presentation.
Okay. So this quick video shows us how we built the form. So here we have all the 8 forms. We go into Spanish and starting right at the very tab, for pages, when we look at pages, you come in and we see our tasks for add, evaluate, and view. We have rosters that are assigned. In this case, this roster dictates that the student can only take the exam once. We have our segments. Here in this segment, what's important is the exam start and end time, and we don't show that to the student. Then we have the segment for the background questionnaire. So here are all the questions that we put in that a student needs to answer, all the branch logic, when it shows. What's unique about the form is this GS Quest Place. This drop down, which is a fabulous thing that was introduced, gave me the ability to create drop down menus so that Chuck didn't have to. So I created the drop downs, but this drop down is then controlled by a smart source that has all the logic as to when each one of these placements should display. Then we also used if statements to leverage when a form just goes right to executing and when a form is stopped and put into pending. So that's why that form, that particular field is so special. We have validations. This is where the who spoke Spanish in your home, again, leveraged by if statements. How do I get it to display? We have our routing so that if a form is in pending mode, the faculty is notified that they have something out there to look at. Here are all our notifications that are driven by the emails. And we again leverage the if statements to make the emails dance. And this tab, the data tab, Chuck will talk about too. What we had to do with this tab, is that we needed to define all of the fields. And if you notice here, we look to a table, PX, the translate table. We take the field and then we equate it to the answer. And we decide where it is coming from with the form, and we use the effective current date. So we had to set that up for each one of the fields so that Chuck could go back and look at the fields and then develop the translate. Here on the data pools, we had to use the points. So for every point field, we directed it back to that translate table so that Chuck could make a calculation, and then we could move that into a format that the registrar could use. All right, so let me close that and go back to my little presentation. Super. So again, we talk a little bit about why is that GS Quest Place so important, and it is a drop down that's controlled by a smart source, and it's used in multiple places throughout the form. And again, the smart source is Span Quest Place. And this is what the smart source looks like. So for every outcome, we have an if statement. So if I wanted to know how or a student could place into Spanish 305, I could then look at the if statement saying, based on the background questionnaire, you have to meet all of this criteria in order to be placed in 305. So now We can talk about the exam. So Chuck, I can be your slide
Okay.
answer.
All right. So we talked about earlier on the exam questions. So for each question, there's 3 fields you have to have on the page or segment. We create the fields on the form, so you have the question, you have the answer, and then you have the point value. For the answer field, we created the translate values on the back end of PeopleSoft and determined the point values in the short name field. If you want to go to the next slide. So in the translate values, we have on the short name, you can see in question 1, there's a 0 for if you answered an A, B, or C, and then there's the 1 value that you would get credit for. After that, you create the data pool source so that the point field pulls the point value from the answer field, which is the short name field from the translate value. And then on the page, we point the form field to the data pool source to store the short name value. So then, if you want to go to the next slide, in order for this all to make sense, we were utilizing PeopleSoft's delivered test credit evaluations. So we had to set up the ranges of scores and what they translated into with the help of the registrar. So the way we approached it was we decided that everybody who wanted to take any of these 8 languages had to go through the language placement process. Otherwise, they couldn't satisfy the prerequisite to get into the basic Spanish 101. So what we did is work with the registrar, and she set up the rules so that if you get a score of a 1, you would get credit for Spanish 99, which therefore let you get into Spanish 101, and vice versa. If you got a 2 to a 39, then you got credit for 101, and you could get into 103. You want to go to the next slide? This is actually an example of the smart source, but we had to replicate those rules in the smart source so that, for example, we are always passing a point value. So even if you're doing the questionnaire only and not the exam, we still passed a value to translate into what course you could get into. So when we did the calculations from an application package called the form events, which is an application class. And we just loop through those fields of values to come up with the sum. Now, with the help of Mike, and I will give a huge shout out to Mike because he was very patient with us. He did a lot in terms of developing the component interface, which actually inserts the values into the test results. And then he also did a lot with the timer using JavaScript and HTML. I can't give him enough credit because I think him and Kristen, if we hadn't had their help, we'd probably still be developing this. So, and I think that's the end of that. Trish, if you want me to keep going with the registrar process,
Sure.
we kind of already talked about it, but by using that process, what she does through the test credits, she goes in and all she has to do is go into each student's record. And what she does is she fetches the scores. And because of the rules that she had previously created, the score assigns the course and gives the student credit on their transcript. And therefore, when they go to enroll, they can now enroll in the course that's appropriate.
And the last slide that we have is the faculty wanted to be able to see certain information. So they can use the View tab to look up a student's form and how they answered the form. But then Chuck also created a query that pulls everything together for them to look at in one place. So we have a form ID. I've hidden the first and last name of the student, but that would just appear as well. We have their graduation year, the duration that it took, if they took the exam, how they took it. Was it placement from the questionnaire, or was it placement from the exam? What their grade was, and the course that they were placed into. And then we also display the catalog for them so that they can go in, and eventually they want to have access to run this themselves, especially when we're coming up with all of the new first year students coming in and taking placement exams. They want to be up on top to make sure that everything is going well. I will say that we have had maybe a few little tiny blips, but because we were so well instructed through our mentoring, that our forms have gone off without any problem.
I'd also add that earlier we said we were at 35801. I think 35803 is out there. And my recommendation is, if you can keep abreast to those and on top of those, it's to your advantage. We kind of settled on 01, and I think the bugs that were fixed in 02 and 03 didn't hit us until we tried to migrate the forms to another environment. So we had to do a little dance in order to get some of the forms into a new environment. So if you can stay on top of those, you're better off.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and it is completely worth the any extra money to have a mentoring partner with Gideon Taylor, because again, our forms, 300 kids went through and not a problem. Now we're just waiting for the other 850.
Wow.
So that's it.
That is phenomenal. Tricia, Chuck, boy, this has been really just kind of so fun. It's so cool to see, and I was especially impressed with just the thoughtfulness, the time you've put into this. Right, you've given so much forethought to how does this how do we make sure we give every user the opportunity to really be thoroughly vetted, in a sense, right? To kind of self-evaluate, but also use this technology to help them get the right place so that they're set up for success. I think that is that's just really, really cool. We're very impressed. I hope everybody has enjoyed what you've shared. This is a chance for anybody who does have questions. Feel free to throw those out right now. If you've got something you want to ask about anything that Holy Cross has done with this this process, this is your chance to throw that out there. Let's see, I don't see anything coming through. Reminder to everybody, this has been recorded. We're going to send this recording out, so you'll get the full recording. We'll take all the fun stuff at the beginning out, but otherwise, you'll get a chance to go back through and to take a look at all of this and answer any questions you might have about it. Feel free to reach out to us if you've got further questions. And I think most of you know our VP of Business Development, Scott Anton. He's always available to answer questions, set up a demo for you to see how you can take advantage of this. Kristen, you're here if you wanted to throw any final comments in on your experience, your perspective on what Holy Cross has done here. Any thoughts you want to add?
Yeah, thanks, Trish, for doing this. It was a great recap. But yeah, this was really exciting. We've never leveraged forms in an exam type of way. So kind of running through the patterns of it was really cool. So hopefully it gives you some ideas on things that you can leverage over your own institutions. And like Scott said, we're happy to help. If you have any ideas, we'd love to, even if we don't partner on them, at least see them when you're done.
Yeah. Had a quick question. Thank you, Kristen. We had a quick question from Peter asking, did you use multiple pages on your forms or just a single page with vertical scroll?
There was
That is a
multiple.
good question.
There were
Yeah.
multiple pages.
As
Multiple,
we,
Chuck?
yes,
Yeah.
as we
Okay.
progressed through, we started with one, and then on the exam, I broke it out into multiples. So it's either or.
Got it. Very good. Good question. All right. If anybody else has anything else you want to know, feel free to reach out to us. You can do that at info@gideontaylor.com. You can also reach out to our help center with questions that you might have about what we've shared with you today. We'll get this recording sent out to everybody, probably, I would guess, sometime next week. And look for our next upcoming Lunch and Learn. Right now, we've got one scheduled for July. So in the meantime, everybody, thank you so much. Trish, Chuck, the entire Holy Cross team, phenomenal, bravo, standing ovation. You've just done a tremendous job here. We're so excited to see what else you do as you move forward with this. And thanks everybody for joining us today. Hope you have a great rest of your day.